Leena thought she knew Rayan until a single photograph exposed his darkest secret. Anya was just the beginning. Sahal was never just a co-worker. And Fariha, she saw the danger before anyone else. What started as a simple betrayal spiraled into violence, hidden identities, and a chilling message that proved one thing: Rayan was never who he claimed to be. Leena had always believed in the idea of soulmates. When she met Rayan, she felt like she had found hers. He was charming, thoughtful, and always knew how to make her laugh. They met at a mutual friend's party 2 years ago, and what started as light conversation quickly turned into something deeper. Over time, Rayan became a permanent part of her life, her confidant, her partner, her future. But like slow poison, things began to change in ways too subtle to immediately recognize. At first, it was just small things. Rayan started locking his phone, something he had never done before. He said it was for privacy, that his workplace had new data protection rules, and she believed him. Then came the late nights at the office. He'd return home with half-hearted explanations and tired eyes. Sometimes he wouldn't return until morning, claiming he had fallen asleep at his desk or crashed at a colleague's place after a project deadline. He stopped asking about her day. When she spoke, he nodded, but wasn't really listening. When she looked into his eyes, they felt distant. Leena brushed it off at first. Everyone has busy seasons. Relationships have phases. She told herself she was being paranoid. But the unease grew inside her like a whisper she couldn't ignore. There were nights he came home smelling like a perfume she didn't use. There were deleted call logs, changed passwords, and excuses that started sounding rehearsed. She wanted to confront him, to ask him outright. But a voice in her head told her to wait until she was sure. She turned to Fariha, her best friend since school, for clarity. Fariha had seen the signs before in her own toxic relationship, and didn't hold back. She said what Leena was afraid to admit: something was wrong. Leena had trusted Rayan too much to snoop before, but now she felt she had no choice. That evening, while Rayan was in the shower, she quietly checked his phone. The lock screen was new, she didn't know the code. Her heart raced, her hands trembled, and she stopped herself before doing anything more. It felt wrong, but it also felt necessary. The turning point came on a Sunday. Rayan left early, saying he had an urgent meeting downtown, but he forgot his wallet. Leena found it an hour after he left and decided to take it to him. She called him, no answer. She sent a message, no reply. She tried calling again, still nothing. Instead of going to his office, she made a different choice. She turned around and went back home. She wasn't sure why, but something inside told her she wasn't ready to confront him just yet. She needed to gather more. That evening, as she emptied his laundry, a small folded receipt fell out of his jacket pocket. It was from an upscale restaurant in another part of the city. The date on it matched the night he had claimed to be in a late client meeting. Her breath caught in her throat as she scanned the bill. 2 meals. 2 glasses of wine. A dessert for 2. Her name wasn't on the reservation, but a partial name was visible on the receipt, blurred by what looked like water damage. She couldn't make it out. Leena stared at the receipt for minutes, replaying that night in her mind. He had come home past midnight that day, claiming exhaustion, but now she knew. He wasn't working. He was with someone. The questions flooded her. Who was the other woman? How long had this been going on? Was she the only one being fooled? Or were there others? Her chest felt heavy. Her world, once secure, had begun to crack. But instead of confronting Rayan that night, she made a different decision. She folded the receipt carefully and placed it in a hidden drawer. She knew the truth was close. She could feel it, but if Rayan was hiding something, she would uncover it on her own terms. Quietly, carefully, completely. The following days were a blur of quiet investigation. Leena kept her behavior normal, careful not to alert Rayan. She smiled when he came home, asked him how his day was, made him dinner as usual. But inside, her mind raced constantly. Every word he said now sounded like a possible lie. Every movement seemed calculated. She no longer looked at him with love, she studied him like a puzzle, searching for pieces that didn't fit. She knew confronting him too soon would be a mistake. If he was hiding something this big, he'd find a way to twist the truth or cover his tracks. So she started observing more closely than ever before. Every time he left, she noted the time. Every time he came back, she checked his clothes, his scent, even his mood. She tracked his movements in a notebook, marking patterns. Rayan had become too predictable in his unpredictability, and that's what gave him away. He was always gone Tuesday and Thursday evenings. At first, he said it was for team meetings. Later, it became last-minute errands. But Leena noticed something strange. He always left in casual clothes, never carrying a laptop or files. Yet he insisted it was work-related. She didn't believe him anymore. And she didn't want to rely on guesswork. Leena reached out to Fariha again. Together, they bought a small GPS tracking device. One night, while Rayan was asleep, Leena slipped it under his car's rear bumper. It was a risk. If he found it, it could end everything. But she was done pretending everything was okay. The truth mattered more now than her fear. The next Tuesday, Leena sat in her room watching the GPS tracker on her tablet. Just after 6 p.m., Rayan's car began to move. She watched the little red dot make its way across the city. Not toward his office. Not toward any known location. It drove into a quiet residential area on the city's outskirts. Leena zoomed in and noted the exact address. The car stopped, and it didn't move for over 3 hours. The next day, she checked again. Thursday evening. Same pattern, same house, same timing. Rayan didn't even lie creatively anymore. It was always emergency at work. But his emergencies had an address now, a real place, a real secret. And she wasn't going to let it stay one. On the third visit, she made her move. Rayan left as usual. Leena waited 10 minutes, grabbed her car keys, and followed at a distance. She stayed 2 streets behind, taking turns slowly and keeping her headlights off when needed. Her heart pounded every time she thought he might spot her. But he didn't. He was too comfortable, too confident. That made him careless. She parked on a side street and walked toward the house. From across the road she watched. Curtains, sign, a warm yellow glow coming from inside. A shadow passed near the window, too short to be Rayan. Another figure appeared. Then him. He stepped out onto the small porch, followed by a woman, tall, well-dressed, familiar. They laughed. She placed her hand on his chest. He leaned in and kissed her. Leena froze. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't a mistake. There was comfort between them. Routine, maybe even love. It was betrayal, slow, planned, and deliberate. She pulled out her phone and took photos. Her hands trembled, her breath caught in her throat. She kept snapping, needing evidence, needing reality to be documented. But the woman, she looked so familiar. Something about her posture, her face, it tugged at a distant memory. Leena couldn't place. She stayed hidden, watching them walk back inside, the door closing gently behind them. It wasn't over. This wasn't the confrontation. But it was proof, and proof would be her power. She got back into her car, heart racing. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat in silence, staring at the image of Rayan and the other woman glowing from her phone screen. The house. The kiss. The lie. Something darker was unfolding, and she was now deep inside it. The next morning, Leena woke up with a pounding heart and 1,000 thoughts swirling in her mind. The image of Rayan, with that woman, haunted her like a nightmare that refused to fade. The woman's face lingered in her memory, though she still couldn't identify where she had seen her before. It gnawed at her. Not knowing was worse than knowing. There was a familiarity, something unsettling she couldn't shake. She sent the photo to Fariha, without any explanation. Within minutes, Fariha called. Her voice was low, tense. She recognized the woman immediately. Her name was Anya. She had once lived in their city and had earned a reputation for getting too close to men who weren't available. Rumors of her involvement in broken relationships had followed her like a shadow. Fariha had even warned someone about her years ago. But Anya had disappeared from town suddenly, and nobody had heard of her since. Leena's skin crawled. Anya. That was her name. Now she had something solid. She spent hours that day searching online. Old social media accounts, forum posts, public records. She found an old photo from years ago on a community page. It was her. There was no mistaking it now. But what made her heart drop was a comment beneath that photo, a woman accusing Anya of being involved with her husband. The comment was from 5 years ago. There were no replies, no follow-ups, nothing. Fariha joined her that evening. Together they laid out everything they had, the GPS logs, the photos, the receipts, and now the name. It was more than coincidence. This wasn't just infidelity, it was deliberate. And there was one thing that caught Leena's attention most. Anya had claimed in a past post that her serious relationship ended when her boyfriend ghosted her. Vanished without a word. Something clicked. Leena rushed to Rayyan's closet and pulled out an old storage box he had once told her not to open. He said it was full of documents from an old job. That night she opened it. Inside were stacks of papers, some blank, others with scribbled notes, but buried beneath them was a photograph. It was old and slightly faded. It was Rayyan and Anya. They were sitting together on a bench in what looked like a small town park. She was leaning into him. His arm was around her. Leena stared in disbelief. Her stomach churned. He had known Anya long before Leena ever came into the picture. She flipped the photo. On the back, a date. 5 years ago, the same year Anya had disappeared from their city. Rayyan hadn't met her recently. He had history with her. A deep one. More questions surged through Leena's mind. Why did he leave Anya? Why was he back with her now? Was this planned from the beginning? Was she just a cover, a replacement, or worse, a pawn in some bigger game? As they examined the papers further, they found notes about investments, fake business addresses, and receipts from places Rayyan had never told Leena about. There were references to a man named Sahil. Fariha remembered that name. Rayyan's co-worker, but now, it seemed like he was more than that. He appeared frequently in Rayyan's notes, always linked to unexplained trips and vague expenses. Leena began to feel the ground slipping beneath her. She thought she was uncovering a cheating scandal. But now it looked bigger, more organized, more dangerous. There were layers of lies stacked so carefully that it felt impossible to tell where the truth even began. Everything she knew about Rayyan was now in question. Who was he, really? Why had he hidden his past with Anya? And what was Sahil's role in all of it? Leena didn't feel hurt anymore. She felt hunted, watched. This wasn't about betrayal of love, it was about betrayal of reality. Nothing in her life felt safe anymore. And worst of all, she didn't know what Rayyan was capable of next. Leena no longer felt like she was uncovering a relationship gone wrong. She was unearthing something far more layered and dangerous. The realization that Rayyan had an entire hidden life was crushing, but it also ignited something cold and calculated inside her. She wouldn't run, she wouldn't confront him blindly, she would plan her next steps the way he had likely planned every lie he told her, quietly, with precision. She spent the next few days pretending everything was normal. Rayyan didn't notice anything unusual. He still came home late, gave lazy excuses, kissed her on the forehead like a guilty man trying to keep a mask from slipping. But Leena was already 2 steps ahead. She began preparing her apartment without raising suspicion. With Fariha's help, she bought 3 small hidden cameras, 2 for the living room, and 1 for the entryway. They were placed where no one would think to look. Every inch of the space Rayyan was familiar with became a trap, designed to catch him in the act. It wasn't just about filming him anymore. It was about exposing him in a way he couldn't deny or escape from. Then came the idea of drawing Anya into the picture. At first, Leena wasn't sure how. She didn't want to make direct contact. That could tip her off. But what if Anya thought Rayan was calling her? What if she thought he was the one asking to meet? Leena created a new, anonymous number using an app and sent a message to Anya. The text was short, vague, and emotionally baiting. Need to talk. It's important. Come to the apartment. 7 p.m., Tuesday. She didn't sign it, but she knew Anya would assume it was from Rayan. He had clearly rebuilt a level of trust with her, and Anya wouldn't question a message that felt familiar. Leena waited for Rayan to come home from work, that Tuesday. She smiled, made dinner, acted like nothing was wrong. She asked him to stay in that evening. Said she wanted to spend time together. He agreed, somewhat distracted. Just after 6:30 p.m., she lit candles, turned down the lights, and told Rayan she was going to the kitchen to bring dessert. But what she really did was open the front door and wait, silently. At exactly 7:04, there was a knock. It was Anya. Leena stepped back, letting the door remain open. She didn't say a word. Rayan, curious, got up from the couch and walked toward the entry. The moment he saw her, his body froze. His expression shifted instantly. First confusion, then realization, and finally panic. The trap had closed, and he knew it. He looked at Leena, then at Anya, then back again. He tried to speak, but no woes came out. Instead, his hands twitched nervously. He glanced around as if searching for an escape. But the apartment doors were shut. The room was silent. Every second ticked louder in the air between them. Leena didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just pressed a button on the remote she held. The TV screen came to life, playing the video footage she had prepared in advance, clips of Rayan's car parked outside Anya's house, the two of them embracing, laughing, kissing, photos, location logs, receipts. The proof was overwhelming, undeniable. Rayan's face turned pale. His breathing quickened. He looked like a man backed into a corner, like a predator finally realizing he's been hunted. Anya took a step backward, stunned. The realization hit her too. She hadn't been chosen. She had been manipulated. Just like Leena. But what no one saw coming was the shift in Rayan's eyes. They weren't filled with shame. They weren't pleading for forgiveness. They were burning with something far more dangerous. Something that looked like fury. The room was heavy with tension. Anya stood frozen near the doorway, her lips slightly parted in disbelief. Leena stayed still, remote in hand, while the video continued playing on the television. Every clip, every photo, every second of proof chipped away at the lies Rayan had built for years, but instead of crumbling, he hardened. His body stiffened, his jaw clenched, and something violent shimmered in his eyes. Leena felt it instantly, an unspoken shift. The air grew colder. Her instincts screamed at her to step back, to create distance, but her feet remained planted. She had seen guilt in people before. She had seen fear, but what she saw now was something else entirely. Rayan didn't look like a man caught. He looked like a man about to explode. Without a word, he lunged toward the television, ripping the cord from the wall and smashing the remote from Leena's hand. The suddenness of his rage was terrifying. The screen went dark, but the damage was already done. The evidence couldn't be unseen. Anya gasped, backing away into the hallway, her purse clutched tightly against her chest. Rayan turned his attention to Leena, eyes wide, breath uneven. He stepped closer, towering over her. His hands twitched at his sides. For the first time since she met him, Leena felt real fear, not of losing him, but of what he might do. Her calm, calculated plan hadn't accounted for violence, but now it was here, standing inches away from her, radiating off the man she once trusted. He grabbed her phone from the table and slammed it to the ground. The screen shattered. She reached for the backup device hidden under the sofa cushion, but he saw the movement and shoved her hard. She stumbled backward, crashing into the side table. A lamp toppled, glass shattering across the floor. Fariha, watching the scene unfold live through the hidden camera feed, was already calling the police. She couldn't speak clearly, her voice trembling as she gave them the address. She had never imagined he would turn this aggressive, this fast. Inside the apartment, the violence escalated. Rayan shouted incoherently, pacing in frantic circles. Leena, despite the pain radiating from her shoulder, stayed composed. She needed to survive this moment. She needed time, minutes, just enough for help to arrive. Anya tried to speak, to calm him, but he swung around and screamed at her too. His face was red, eyes wild. When she tried to leave, he blocked the door. Leena saw her opportunity and quietly edged toward the kitchen. She reached for the drawer, the one that held the heavy glass vase she had placed there days ago, just in case. Rayan caught the movement from the corner of his eye and stormed toward her. In that split second, she grabbed the vase and swung it with all her strength. It connected with his shoulder, sending him reeling backward. He hit the dining chair and crashed to the floor, stunned. Leena didn't wait. She pulled Anya toward the kitchen exit and pushed her through. Together, they bolted into the hallway, slamming the door behind them. Neighbors had begun to open their doors, startled by the noise. Down the hallway, red and blue lights flashed. Sirens howled, growing louder. Rayan stumbled out of the apartment, seconds later, bleeding slightly from his arm, disoriented and furious. But it was too late. 2 officers rushed in, tackling him to the floor. He struggled, shouted, tried to explain, but the bruises on Leena's shoulder, the broken phone, the wrecked apartment, and the hidden footage told a story louder than his voice ever could. As the officers hauled him away in handcuffs, Leena stood in silence, heart racing. She had survived. But what haunted her wasn't just what had happened. It was the realization that the man she once loved had never really existed, and what lay behind his mask was something much darker than betrayal. Rayan's arrest didn't bring the relief Leena thought it would. It brought more questions, more digging, more shadows where she expected answers. In the days that followed, the apartment remained in chaos, glass still wedged in the carpet, her shoulder wrapped in a bandage, her thoughts scattered like broken pieces of the life she once trusted. The man who had held her heart for 2 years was now behind bars, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst hadn't passed. It had only begun. The police launched an investigation into the assault, but that was just the surface. Leena provided everything: recordings, photos, GPS logs, emails, receipts, and even the storage box filled with cryptic notes and fake documents. What started as a domestic case quickly evolved into something far more serious. Officers discovered that Rayan had used several different aliases in the past 5 years, multiple identification cards, bank accounts under fake names, businesses that didn't exist, all masked behind a clean face and a respectable job title. Anya, too, came forward. After the attack, she admitted to the detectives that Rayan had once disappeared on her without a word years ago. She believed she had been ghosted. But now, she realized she had been discarded the moment she started asking questions about his past. She was young and vulnerable then, and Rayan had manipulated her with the same warmth and charm he later used on Leena. He was a predator who knew how to wear love like a costume. Digging into his phone records, investigators traced calls to multiple women across different cities. Women who had once filed complaints that never went anywhere. Emotional abuse, financial scams, promises of marriage followed by sudden disappearances. No one had been able to pin him down. He always left before things caught up to him. He moved like smoke, vanishing before anyone could grasp the truth. But now, Leena had anchored him. And with him finally in custody, his carefully buried secrets began rising to the surface. Even Sahil, Rayan's so-called co-worker, became part of the unfolding puzzle. He was arrested after police raided his apartment and found documents tying him to a series of fraudulent schemes. Fake investment firms, shell companies. Sahil confessed that he had helped Rayan create and maintain these false fronts in exchange for a cut of the profits. He claimed he had no idea about the violence or the double life with the women, but Leena doubted that. He had known too much, and said too little. As the charges piled up, Rayan's mask finally cracked. In court, he sat expressionless, as if he wasn't living in the same world as the people he had hurt. He didn't look at Leena once. Not during the hearing, not when her voice echoed in the courtroom as she described what he'd done, not even when the judge denied him bail. Rayan was officially charged with aggravated assault, fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. He faced multiple counts and the possibility of a long sentence. But for Leena, the real victory wasn't the punishment, it was the exposure, the unraveling of the perfect image he had spent years building. That image was gone now, forever. Still at night, Leena lay awake, not from fear, but from the weight of everything she hadn't seen. She replayed memories, conversations, touches that had felt real. They were all illusions. Scripts written by someone who had worn her trust like a shield while living another life in the shadows. Every day, more women came forward. Some anonymous, some ready to speak. All with eerily similar stories. Rayan hadn't just fooled her. He had made a career out of fooling everyone. The aftermath of Rayan's arrest echoed far beyond the walls of Leena's apartment. News of the incident spread quickly once the story reached the local press. It began with a small article. Man arrested after alleged assault on girlfriend during confrontation, but within days the narrative exploded. The headlines shifted from a domestic violence case to something far more complex. Serial fraudster exposed after violent outburst, double life uncovered by girlfriend's brave trap. The media latched onto the drama, but they didn't know half of it. Leena avoided the reporters who gathered outside her building for days. She didn't want fame. She didn't want to be known as the girl who caught a con man. She wanted her normal life back, her job, her privacy, her peace. But peace was slow to return. Every corner of her apartment reminded her of the night it all shattered. Every creak in the hallway made her heartbeat quicken, as if some part of Rayan still lingered in the shadows. Fariha stayed close. She checked in daily, often sleeping over to make sure Leena wasn't alone. Together, they tried to resume pieces of their routines, cooking, watching old shows, cleaning up the mess Rayan left behind. But underneath the surface, they were both aware. What they had uncovered wasn't just one man's betrayal, it was a glimpse into something deeper and darker. Anya had gone public. A major news channel interviewed her anonymously. Her face blurred and voice altered. She spoke about how Rayan reappeared in her life like a ghost, charming and apologetic. She had been hesitant at first, but he convinced her that the past was a mistake and the future would be different. She had believed him, but now she realized she was only one of many. Just another name in a pattern that stretched back years. Leena watched the interview in silence, her eyes fixed on the screen. Anya's words were raw, honest, and eerily familiar. Her story mirrored Leena's more than either of them had expected. It was unsettling to know how easily he had played them both, and probably others too. The mask he wore didn't just fool women, it fooled friends, colleagues, even police officers who once dismissed past reports as misunderstandings. Eventually the authorities connected Rayan to at least 4 other women across 3 cities. Some he dated, some he scammed for money, some he abandoned without warning. All of them shared a common thread. Rayan had controlled the story, controlled the timing, and walked away without consequences. Until now. His trial date was announced. 12 charges were officially filed, ranging from aggravated assault and identity fraud to financial deception and obstruction. Sahil, his accomplice, had cut a deal in exchange for his testimony. He confirmed what everyone feared. This was not a man caught in one bad relationship. This was a man who built his life on manipulation. But as the legal process unfolded, Leena tried to rebuild. She began volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping others who had survived similar betrayals. In their stories, she found pieces of herself, and through them, she found strength. Her own experience, once a source of pain, became a tool for healing others. Slowly, she started to believe in herself again, not as a victim but as someone who had survived the worst kind of deception and emerged with her clarity intact. The footage she had gathered that night, once a private record of pain, was now being used in training sessions for law enforcement and domestic abuse counselors. Her story had become a case study. Her courage had become a message. Still, there were nights when she woke up in cold sweats. Echoes of Rayan's voice, his eyes filled with rage, the way he moved toward her when he realized she had outsmarted him. Those images weren't easy to erase. But each day she chose to keep going was another day. She proved that Rayan hadn't won. He had hated her. He had hurt her. But he hadn't destroyed her. And that, perhaps, was his greatest failure. Months passed, and Leena slowly settled into a new rhythm. Her life didn't go back to what it was, too much had changed for that. But it moved forward. She had found a small apartment across town, far from the place that once held memories she could no longer trust. The new space was quieter, filled with light and untainted by Rayan's shadow. She furnished it herself, carefully choosing each item. There was no trace of her old life. She intended it that way. Her story had touched thousands, but Leena kept her distance from the spotlight. She attended the trial quietly, accompanied by Fariha and a counselor from the women's shelter. She didn't testify again. Her footage and statement were enough. But she watched from the back of the courtroom as the man who once claimed to love her sat behind glass, emotionless and hollow. Rayan was sentenced to 12 years in prison. No possibility of parole for at least 7. When the gavel came down, Leena didn't feel triumphant. She felt exhausted, like she had been holding her breath for too long. She focused on healing. She started working with the shelter more regularly, even launching a support group for survivors of manipulation and hidden abuse. The women she met were varied, young, old, wealthy, struggling, but all of them shared a familiar look in their eyes, the recognition of betrayal that ran deep. One afternoon, after hosting a session at the shelter, Leena returned to her apartment to find an envelope slipped under her door. There was no return address, no name, just a plain white envelope, slightly creased at the corners. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Something about its presence felt off, cold. Inside was a single photo. It was grainy, clearly taken from a distance. It showed Leena, Fariha, and Anya sitting at a cafe patio just days earlier. They were laughing, drinks on the table, unaware of being watched. On the back of the photo, written in slanted, uneven handwriting, were 4 chilling words: "I always leave something behind." Her heart dropped. She rechecked the envelope. Empty. No fingerprints, no markings, nothing. Her breathing quickened. The photo hadn't just been taken, it had been delivered by someone who knew exactly where she lived, someone who had been close enough to snap that moment but careful enough not to be seen. She contacted the police immediately. They took the letter and the photo as evidence and began tracing nearby security cameras. The building had no front desk or surveillance of its own, a decision she now regretted. Her new apartment, meant to be a safe haven, had just been violated without a sound. 2 days later, an officer called with an update. The photo had been traced back to a storage locker, registered in a different name, but the handwriting matched notes found in Rayan's old files. When investigators entered the locker, they were stunned to find boxes filled with hundreds of similar photos, different women, different cities, some recent, others dating back years, all taken secretly. Most of the women were unidentified. The discovery opened a new investigation, one that suggested Rayan had been more than a fraud. He had been a watcher, a collector of moments no one knew were being stolen. It was impossible to know how many people he had followed, studied, obsessed over. And now that he was behind bars, the fear remained. Had he acted alone, or had someone else been helping him continue from the outside? Leena stared at her own photo for hours. The laughter frozen in time, now twisted into something sinister. She realized then that even though Rayan was gone, the damage he left behind was alive, watching, waiting. Her story wasn't over. It had only shifted into a darker chapter, one where safety was never guaranteed, and trust had to be earned all over again.